Hi there and welcome to Dot Connecting with David Icke. This is the first one of 2014, so welcome back. Without further ado, over to the man himself, David Icke. Hi David.
Hi Rich. Isn't it great to be getting back to what this station was set up to do?
Fantastic.
Put out information that will alert people to where we're going unless we head
That's
it
the
off,
plan.
which is what this was all about and why it was created. And I'm going to take it on. You know, the last Dot Connecting program talked about a guy called Dr. Richard Day and how he'd spoken to pediatricians in 1969. He was a Rockefeller insider. And he had in 1969 said, this is how the world's going to change. And it's like looking at the world today, not only where it's going, but in many ways where it already is. And then there was the theme of George Orwell, who published his book in 1948 called 1984. And look around you. The Orwellian state global state is unfolding. Then you look at Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, published in 1932. Look around you. It's unfolding what he, in his novel, said was going to happen. And you can pick up these themes and these indications all over the place, if you research deeply enough, of how the way the world has gone and where it's going and what is happening today is not random. It's coldly, carefully planned. And I want to talk today about another example of that. It was a document I came across very early on in my research, which started around 25 years ago. And it's called Quiet Weapons for Silent Wars. Sorry, the other way around. Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. And what it is, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, it's a manual for people who have come into the cabal, shall we say, or to work for the conspiracy to take us into this Orwellian state. It's a manual explaining how you manipulate the population through silent weapons. And silent weapons are different expressions of social engineering. My new book's called The Perception Deception, and that's what we're talking about. If you are going to control billions of people, then you can't do it physically. There's too many of them compared with you, even with your jackboots in uniform. There's too many. You have to manipulate and program the perceptions of the population, the perceptions of themselves and the perception of their reality and world events, so that they will then act and respond in a way that suits your agenda and allows this Orwellian nightmare to unfold. And Silent Weapons was dated May 1979 and was apparently found in a copier at a surplus sale in 1986 by a employee of Boeing. And when you find that in the 1980s and you look at what it says, people can say, well, someone's just made this up. So the proof of its genuineness and validity is, does what it says in there occur as the years go past? Well, this is how the manual described the nature and the consequences of this perception manipulation that is going on globally. Everything that is expected from an ordinary weapon is expected from a silent weapon by its creators, but only in its own manner of functioning. It shoots situations instead of bullets. Manipulate the situation, like I talk about problem, reaction, solution. Create the problem, get the public to see the problem in the way that you've told them to see it, and then they will react by allowing solutions to that problem to occur that they would possibly have protested against and resisted had that problem not been manipulated into place in the first place. It's propelled, talking about silent weapons, it's propelled by data processing instead of chemical reaction, explosion. Originating from bits of data instead of grains of gunpowder, from a computer instead of a gun, operated by a computer programmer instead of a marksman, under the orders of a banking magnate instead of a military general. It makes no obvious explosive noises, causes no obvious physical or mental injuries, and does not obviously interfere with anyone's daily social life. Yet, the document says, the silent weapons make an unmistakable noise, cause unmistakable physical and mental damage, and unmistakably interferes with the daily social life, i.e., unmistakable to a trained observer, one who knows what to look for. And as we go deeper into this, we'll see how the world is constantly being manipulated in terms of perception by manufactured events and manufactured, if you like, causes, which are designed to have a response or an effect to the cause. And in doing that, and it's done in a scientific way, based on fantastic data that they gather and then process, to see if you do that, what will happen then. You see that the world that we think is random and is just happening by chance is unbelievably, in its depth, manipulated on purpose. The document says the public cannot comprehend this weapon and therefore cannot believe that they are being attacked and subdued by a weapon. That David Icke, he's a nutter. He's saying it's a conspiracy and our perception's being manipulated. No, it's not. What's on the telly, darling? Most people would never even think that their minds are being manipulated daily, minute by minute, to perceive the world and self in a certain way. The public might instinctively feel that something is wrong. Now, isn't that true? How many people, and more and more now, that's why more and more people are starting to look at the information that people like me and the People's Voice are putting out. There's just something wrong in the world. It's not right. I don't like the way the world's going. But what? But what? And the idea is to use the silent weapons of social engineering without allowing people to realize how they're being manipulated. Thus, they instinctively think, well, something's not right, but they can't grasp what it is that's not right. The public might instinctively feel that something is wrong, but because of the technical nature of the silent weapon, they cannot express their feeling in a rational way or handle the problem with intelligence. Therefore, they don't know how to cry for help and don't know who and how to associate with others to defend themselves against it. And it's interesting and so appropriate that we're talking about this document on a show on the People's Voice called The Dot Connector. Because as long as you keep those dots apart, you keep people in that feeling of something's not right, but what? And then you go boom, 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 picture, pattern, tapestry, instead of a load of unconnected strands. People go, so that's what's happening. And it breaks one of the biggest, most powerful aspects of this social engineering, silent weapons for quiet wars, which is ignorance of how it's happening and to what end. When a silent weapon is applied gradually, very relevant this is, the public adjusts, adapts to its presence and learns to tolerate its encroachment on their lives until the pressure, brackets psychological via economic, here we go, economic crashes, austerity, becomes too great and they crack up. And how obviously relevant and true is that? What do I talk about? The totalitarian tiptoe, where you start at A and you're going to Z, but you don't go in one big leap or big leaps, two big leaps, because people go, what's going on? There's changes going on. You go step by step by step. And I've also talked in this program about how the system pushes the gate to the next stage of its agenda, and it's testing resistance. How many people are resisting the gate opening to what we're now proposing. And if the resistance ain't great, they walk through it and they go to the next gate and they do it again. And all the time this is happening. And so when a silent weapon is applied gradually, the public adjusts, adapts to its presence. I mean, if you took today's society and you had imposed it upon the people in the 1950s and the 1960s, just like that, overnight, what's happening? What's going on? The world's gone crazy. But because it's been done in steps, each step, well, I don't like this, it's Big Brother, you know, it's Big Brother gone mad. And then suddenly, well, now it's the norm. So now the gate opens and we go on to the next. Oh, I'm not sure about this. And well, there's only a few people saying, I'm not sure about this, because what the system's doing while they're pushing the gate open, they're saying, hey, have you seen the football scores today? You know, have you seen what's happening in the soap? What? Yeah. What about the latest crap by Simon Cowell? Have you watched that? Yeah, I'm watching it. Yeah, okay, well, we'll just walk through this gate while you're watching that. And this is how the whole social engineering thing works. And it says here, therefore, the silent weapon is a type of biological warfare. It is. It's a warfare on a war on our perception. It attacks the vitality, options, and mobility of the individuals of a society by knowing, understanding, manipulating, and attacking their sources of natural and social energy and their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. And one of the greatest ways that they target emotional strengths and weaknesses is by constantly giving people something to fear. Fear whether they're going to have a home at the end of the month. Fear if they're going to have a job. Fear if they're going to be attacked by terrorists. Fear of this disease or whatever that they throw out through the media to frighten us. All the time. Fear, fear, fear. And when people are in a state of fear, they almost always look out of themselves, outside of themselves, to find protection from what they've been manipulated to fear. And so here's more power to the state, here's more power to the uniforms, here's more power to the dark suits, because they will protect me from what they, in total, have persuaded me to fear. And we've also talked, I mean, it is quite obvious, really, how the power of the manipulation of money is controlling human society. It talks there about it being a banking magnate running all this and not a military general. And what's fascinating about silent weapons is that it mentions the House of Rothschild being the instigator of the economic system that we have, and how the Rothschilds understood and understand, and all those that offshoot from them now, that the money system, I've been saying this for years, is actually run as an electronic, energetic construct, like electronic circuitry. And indeed, when you look at it, the more that money you can hold and see goes out of circulation, the more it is literally electronic circuitry. And so silent weapons details the financial system at length, and how it's controlled by the system that I've been exposing, and as I say, it mentions Rothschild. This is what it says about money in economics. Economics is only a social extension of a natural energy system. I've been saying this for years. Since energy is the key to all activity on the face of the earth, it follows that in order to attain a monopoly of energy, raw materials, goods and services, and to establish a world system of slave labor, it is necessary to have a first strike capability in the field of economics. It says, in order to maintain our position, it is necessary that we have absolute first knowledge of the science of control over all economic factors and the first experience at engineering the world economy. And what they mean by first experience is we know how it works, but we don't let anyone else, let alone the target population, know how it works. In order to achieve such sovereignty, it says, we must at least achieve this one end, that the public will not make either the logical or mathematical connection between economics and the other energy sciences, or learn to apply such knowledge. Exactly what I've just said. It says, to make a short story of it all, excuse me, it was discovered that an economy obeyed the same laws as electricity, and that all of the mathematical theory and practical and computer know-how developed for the electronic field could directly be applied to the study of economics. It's an electrical construct, which we see as money moving around and changing hands. That's why, because it is a computerized electrical construct, they can make the money go wherever they want it to go, i.e. towards themselves. It says this discovery was not openly declared, and its more subtle implications were and are kept a closely guarded secret. For example, I mean, wait for this. For example, that in an economic model, human life is measured in dollars. Is that true or what? And that the electric spark generated when opening a switch is connected to an active inductor. That is mathematically analogous to the initiation of war. And so we're seeing all these things going on that we call world events, but they're just like an electrical system. This has to happen for this to happen, so we see that as a war. But to them, it's part of the economic construct and the manipulation of the economic system, leading to a position which I'm talking about all the time, where you've got a mass of the population, basically all but less than 1%, who are in abject poverty and slavery. Talks in here about slave labor, global slave labor. And then you've got the less than 1% in fantastic luxury. And what is money? It is merely figures on a screen moving around, theoretically measuring the wealth of people. And if you control the electrical system, you move those electrical pulses in the direction that you want. And that's how you create a less than 1% with fantastic, unbelievable amounts of wealth. In other words, electrical pulses stored on a database, and you've taken it away from the mass of the population purely by the manipulation of electrical signals. But people don't realize this, though. They don't see what is happening.
It's time to take a break now.
Okay.
Shall we take a break? We'll take a very quick break. That's the end of the first part of Dot Connecting with David Icke. When we come back, we'll have plenty more. Back in a minute. Welcome back to part two of Dot Connecting with David Icke. As I remind you, from time to time, you can catch previous episodes on davidicke.com and also on the People's Voice YouTube channel. David, back to you.
Yeah, one of the things that the document Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars emphasizes is the need to get maximum data on everybody. It points out that the more data you can get about people, the more control you can have, because the better you understand that if you do that, they will react like that. And what we've got, of course, all these years later, since this was produced and later found and exposed, is staggering levels of data collection on people. I mean, we've seen the Edward Snowden revelations and all the others about the NSA in America. It's going on everywhere, and GCHQ in Britain. And this data, people think that it's only for surveillance. Well, it's surveillance for those that the system is concerned about and wants to know what they're doing, because they're starting to suss the system and how it works. But it's also, collectively, it's about taking fantastic amounts of data from people, you can get it from the social networks and all these other sources now, where people are giving them all the. It's like, David Petraeus, basically talked about when he was head of the CIA. We don't have to keep surveillance on people anymore. They tell us all we want to know. In many, many cases, that's true. But it's going through these computers, and they're talking about, this great massive one they've just opened in Utah, which is processing information from all these different internet and phone and other sources. And they're saying it's being held. Well, it ain't just being held. It's being processed. And computers of a advancement that would beg a belief, even in the public arena today, and see how far it's gone there, are doing the processing and coming up with a model that says, if you want the world to go here, you do that. And then what they do is that. Hey presto. And interestingly, the next thing I'm going to come to from the document is something that the document calls shock testing. Here we are back to, if you do that, that's what will happen. And it calls it shock testing. And it describes it as like massive hikes in fuel, massive hikes in energy costs, massive hikes in food costs. It's done systematically, out of nowhere, or very quickly at least, and then the society responds and actually everything moves. The kaleidoscope moves as a result of it. And this is what the document says. Eventually, every individual element of the structure comes under computer control through a knowledge of personal, what have I just said? Personal preferences, such knowledge guaranteed by computer association of consumer preferences, Universal Product Code, UPC, Zebra Stripe pricing codes on packages, etc., it says, with identified consumers, brackets identified via association with the use of a credit card, and later a permanent tattooed body number invisible under normal ambient illumination, microchips. Microchips. That's where we're obviously going, and they were talking about this in 1979. But of course, as we've seen in previous dot connecting shows, they were talking about this earlier. And it says that silent weapons it is the manipulation, the mind manipulation through things like advertising. Great line. This is a direct quote from the document. If a person is spoken to by a TV advertiser as if he were a 12-year-old, then due to suggestibility, he will, with a certain probability, respond or react to that suggestion with the uncritical response of a 12-year-old, and will reach into his economic reservoir, we will call a pocket, and deliver its energy, because money is energy. I've been saying all these years, that's what they see money as, energy. We see kind of, coins and bits of paper, but to them it's energy. They're moving energy around. And they're trawling and vampiring the energy of the population through what we call money. They will deliver the energy to that product on impulse when he passes it in the store. So all the time, not just advertising, but mainstream television in general is constantly suggesting things to people which go in the subconscious, and they're walking down the aisle, simple example, in a supermarket, something catches their eye, and I'll buy that. Why are you buying that? I don't know, I'm going to try that. And it's all been put in the subconscious, possibly even weeks before. And it goes on, silent weapons, about these price shocks. Economic engineers achieve the same results in studying the behavior of the economy and the consumer public by carefully selecting a staple commodity such as beef, coffee, gasoline, or sugar, and then causing a sudden change or shock in its price or availability, thus kicking everyone's budget and buying habits out of shape. They're moving the kaleidoscope. They're subtly changing society by simply saying, okay, we're going to hike the price of A, B, or C. They then observe the shock waves which result by monitoring the changes in advertising prices and sales of that and other commodities. In other words, they're gaining knowledge all the time on how that cause will have that effect, and that effect will take society in the direction that they want. Excuse me. The objective of such studies is to acquire the know-how to set the public economy into a predictable state of motion or change. Even a controlled, self-destructive state of motion, which will convince the public that certain expert people should take control of the money system and re-establish security, rather than liberty and justice for all. When the subject citizens are rendered unable to control their financial affairs, they, of course, become totally enslaved, a source of cheap labor. And I've been, like I say, going on and on about this Hunger Games society, which is at the end of this road if we don't get together and head it off. What they're doing is that they are taking away people's ability to be self-sufficient financially. They're starting with all the austerity programs, but now with all the outsourcing and so many other things, they're eating into what we call the middle classes. The idea is through this control of this electronic energetic system we call money, is to take the money from the population. So the few, the state, are in control of whether they eat, whether they drink, whether they have shelter, and all these things. And if you are going to have those things, you do as we say, and you become our literal slaves. And that is where we are heading, and this document, written in 1979, was saying that in very great detail. And of course, it's talking here about giving power to experts to sort out the problem. There's a guy called Zbigniew Brzezinski, a major insider in America. He was Jimmy Carter's former national security advisor. And if you read a Brzezinski book, and you'll see the future, because he's telling you in what he's saying and how he's saying society should change. And he was talking decades ago now about the way that society would be moved into a position which the insiders call the post-democratic, post-industrial society, the Hunger Games society, in other words. And he was saying how technocrats, experts, would take over everything. We've already had non-elected bankers in control of Italy and Greece because of the problems created by economic mayhem, which this describes is systematic. It's unfolding. The silent weapons for quiet wars is unfolding before our eyes, just like 1984, just like Brave New World, and just like the predictions of Dr. Richard Day I talked about last time in 1969. Silent Weapons says about money, not only the prices of commodities, but also the availability of labor can be used as a means of shock testing. Labor strikes deliver excellent test shocks to an economy, especially in the critical service areas of trucking, transportation, communication, public utilities, energy, water, garbage collection, etc. By shock testing, it is found that there is a direct relationship between the availability of money flowing into an economy and the real psychological outlook and response of the masses of people dependent upon that availability. So, people on the left in politics, what I call often, there are many genuine ones, but what I call the robot radicals, they think they're challenging the system. They are fundamentally part of the system because the system constantly needs polarities to play off against each other, to divide and rule. And a lot of these labor organizations that claim to be there for the people, the workers, are actually infiltrated by this cabal to create situations like if you look at the fantastic strikes in Britain in the late 1970s, what do they call it, the Winter of Discontent. That was supposed to be a disaster for the government of the day. It was not. It was a disaster for, if you like, human freedom, in the sense of this. That era of constant massive strikes, the system loved it. The people thought they were challenging the system and opposing the system. System loved it, because what happened? They had the excuse, manipulation of perception, to bring in Margaret Thatcher and destroy the unions and all the good things that unions were doing. And so if people see left opposing the system as good and the right, the system bad, they've completely lost the plot. And robot radicals are often so self-obsessed that and so ignorant of the world and how they're being played like a stringed instrument that they will attack and try to undermine the very people who are exposing the system as it really is. Now, this is fascinating. It is to me as an observer of human behavior and perception and psychology. If you're doing all this, you've got to stop people realizing you're doing it. So you've got to get them looking in all directions except at what you're doing. It's just like the magician, you know. My trick's going here, so I'm going to divert you here while I'm doing it. So silent wars or quiet wars goes into diversion and manipulation and perception in great detail, and it's fascinating. It says that there's a battle plan and a war on perception, like I say. And this includes the targeting of people's perceptions by the following: disengaging their minds, sabotaging their mental activities, providing a low-quality program of public education in mathematics, logic, systems design and economics, and discouraging technical creativity. We have clearly had a major dumbing down of education. And what is education? It is getting children from the earlier and earlier ages now, it's putting them in a classroom at least 5 days a week, and it is having someone representing the system telling them what's real and unreal, right and wrong, possible and impossible, good and bad, all their formative years. But not telling them, because the person at the front of the class next to the blackboard doesn't know, because they're just going through the state's curriculum, not telling them what they really need to know, which is A, that they're infinite awareness and their body is an experience, and the body's not what they are. They're not little me, they're infinite me. But more than that, they're not being told, of course, how the system works and how their perceptions are being manipulated. And discouraging technical creativity. Make them as intelligent as they need to be to build their own prison, but not intelligent enough to realize that's what they're doing. And it goes on about the diversions. It talks about engaging their emotions, increasing their self-indulgence and their indulgence in emotional and physical activities by unrelenting emotional affrontations and attacks, which it calls mental and emotional rape, by way of a constant barrage of sex, violence and wars in the media, especially the TV and the newspapers. And another aspect of that is desensitizing people from things that without the desensitizing, they would go, what the heck is happening? Oh, another war. So it talks about giving the target population what they desire in excess, what they call junk food for thought. Did I mention Simon Cowell? And depriving them of what they really need. Rewriting history and law and subjecting the public to the deviant creation. In fact, don't let them know the nature of the reality that they are in. This is why science is so suppressed and holds such a narrow band of possibility when people outside of that mainstream science have a much greater awareness of the reality that we're actually experiencing. And it says if you do this, you are able to shift their thinking from personal needs to highly fabricated outside priorities. Do I need to know the reality that I'm experiencing so I then have the power to interact with that reality and create a life that I want rather than one that is being given to me? No. Do I need to know how the world works and the forces that are manipulating my life? No. So what do I need? Nike trainers. That's what I need. Nike trainers. And a nice T-shirt with the maker's name on it, so they don't even have to advertise anymore. I'm going to pay them to advertise for them. What do they call it? Highly fabricated outside priorities. Diversions into nonsense. Well, I want the iPad. He's got a bigger iPad. Oh my God. Do you know what the nature of reality is? No, I want an iPad, mate. This is what's been done. The human race has been manipulated and socially engineered into being, with honourable exceptions and growing, thank goodness, a bunch of kids in the playground. And it goes on and to encapsulate the silent weapons approach. Wait for this. Media. Keep the public adult public attention diverted away from the real social issues and captivated by matters of no real importance. And that is exactly the reason the People's Voice was created and why the People's Voice must stay on air. Because we are challenging that by treating people like adults and giving them information that the nonsense that this is talking about will never give them. Schools. Keep the young public ignorant of real mathematics, so they don't understand the money system for a start, real economics, real law, and real history. Don't let them know where it's all come from, because that gives them a greater fix on where they are. Give them a false timeline and sequence for where we got here, and then they won't understand where they are in anything like the same way. Entertainment. Keep the public entertainment below a 6th grade level. Did I mention Simon Cowell? Work. Keep the public, this is lovely, this. Work. Keep the public busy, busy, busy with no time to think, back on the farm with the other animals. In other words, keep them busy surviving. Got to survive. Rent. Well, this is it. Simon Cowell. Over here. And don't let them go. Blimey. So that's what's happening. And it's all calculated and all set down in this document, which we will complete after the break, I think.
We will indeed. We'll take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll have the final part of Dot Connecting with David Icke. Back in a minute. And you're very welcome back to the final part of Dot Connecting with David Icke. Very quickly reminding you once again is that you can watch previous episodes of it on YouTube and on davidicke.com. David.
Thanks. I'm just going to continue, Rich, with the diversions and the manipulations of perception and society that silent weapons for quiet wars details in great detail. This is another list of things that it says they set out to do. Keep the public ignorant and you have less public organisation. And if you don't know there's a problem or what the problem is, how are you going to organise against it? Create preoccupations and you lower defences. We've talked about that. Get them to go into areas that are irrelevant and miss the ones that are really relevant. You know, we talked about these various pre-knowledge documents and books, and one of the common themes that I've been picking up is the family unit. They want to break up the family unit because they don't want anything that has coherence. They want nothing that has coherence. And here we go in this document. Attack the family unit and you control the education of the young. And what Dr. Richard Day was talking about, we mentioned in the last Dot Connecting show, was that schools were going to become the hub of the community. And if you see how parents are losing rights after rights after rights over their children and their future and what happens to them, while the state's getting those rights and dictating their child's life. That's the idea until there is no parental influence whatsoever. Give out less cash and more credit and you trigger more self-indulgence and social engineering data. In other words, let them have as much debt as they want. They will then become obsessed with consumerism and materialism. And as they're going around using the credit card, we're gleaning more and more data that we can put through these massively advanced computers to get a very accurate understanding of how they will react if we do A, B, or C. Encourage social conformity and you make programming easier. That means if there's someone who's putting their head up and saying, "What about this?" You hit them with a hammer. And you know this social engineering, this manipulation of perception, has reached such depth that you can have people saying, "We must give the people a voice. The people must have a say. We must have the free flow of information." And when you create it, they want to destroy it. That's the level of, well, for me, in my opinion, it is a form of insanity, because the programming becomes so deep and the responses are so computer-like, so software-like, that there is no real control of perception and the behavior that comes from that perception, because it's all reflex action, almost computerized software responses. That has to be a form of insanity when you are comparing that with free-thinking consciousness. Minimize protests about tax and you maximize the input of personal economic data while minimizing enforcement problems. And what you've got, again, with the robot radicals over the years, you've got a lot of them saying, "Hey, tax more," and then you've got the right saying, "Tax less." Well, how about let's look at taxation and what it is, which is the state stealing energy from the people. And let's see if there's other ways that we can organize ourselves without having the state taking vastly increased all the time amounts of human energy earned by human effort. But no, more tax, less tax. What is the common denominator of those two things? Tax, which is what we need to address. Stabilize consent and you stabilize control. Again, get every people into the consensus. So now we've got political parties in America and in Britain and elsewhere that claim to be different, and they're standing on the same postage stamp. And the idea is to get the population the same, and it's happening. Tighten control of variables, i.e. individuality, and you have greater predictability. So anyone that is a maverick, and you look at the education system, it's always bashing the mavericks. They want to give them drugs now because they're saying the mavericks, who are nothing more than bored, they've got attention deficit disorder, so let's drug them because they're mavericks. Hey, we've got one thinking for themselves over here, quick, call the police. And it's the same with people in society, people like me and others who stand up and say, "Hey, this is not right. Hey, give him a bash. No problem, he's mad." Tighten control of variables like individuality and you have greater predictability. So clear. Maximize control and you minimize resistance to control. This is the more the police state comes in. And in many ways, I've mentioned before, the revelations about the National Security Agency and the surveillance. It's great that people become aware of actually what's going on, to a certain extent anyway. But what that's also saying to you is, so anything you do, we know about it. And so it's trying to, again, frighten people into a situation where they freeze and don't challenge the system because they fear the consequences of doing so. And what you're doing is you're getting more and more people to conform and act like the herd. Collapse the currency and you destroy faith in a country and each other. And that is obviously what's happening around the world with the crashing of the world economy. This document says, it is most interesting that by observing and measuring the economic models by which the public tries to run from their problems and escape from reality, and by applying the mathematical theory of operations research, it is possible to program computers to predict the most probable combination of created events, brackets shocks, which will bring about a complete control and subjugation of the public through a subversion of the public economy, brackets by shaking the plum tree. 2008, austerity, bail-ins. And it talks about how the system depends on personal data and information being handed over by what it calls a docile public through what it calls, interestingly, legal, brackets, but not always lawful, force, especially in tax documents. Furthermore, the number of such forms submitted to the tax authorities is a useful indicator of public consent, an important factor in strategic decision planning. What resistance is there to the gate? And here's a fascinating kind of almost condemnation, if you like, of the way people accept anything. When the government is able to collect tax and seize private property without just compensation, it is an indication that the public is ripe for surrender and is consenting to enslavement and legal encroachment. No resistance, next gate. A good and easily quantified indicator of harvest time is the number of public citizens who pay income tax despite an obvious lack of reciprocal or honest service from the government. My brother said to me years ago, we're paying more tax and the services are getting worse. What's going on? Because they're taking the money. The money's going out of the system. That's what it's doing. And the less money there is in the system, the less money there is to go around, the more closer we become to the Hunger Games society when we have this mass poverty. And one of the things that kind of comes from this as well, I think it's of major importance, is obviously if you are going to subjugate a target population of billions, you have to divide and rule them. And we have all the obvious divide and rules like religion and race and income bracket and culture. But the one, and this is in its own way talks about it, the one that's missed is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, divider and ruler of all. Me, me, me. When you are looking at every situation in response only to how does this benefit me, how does this affect me, what are the consequences for me, you are, with that response, with that attitude, immediately disconnecting yourself from every other human being on the planet. Because this situation affects me, me, me in what way? You're already in a bubble. Instead of saying, what is the fair and just thing to do in this situation? Not for me, but for the greater good. And when you do that, you connect yourself with the greater human family instead of disconnecting yourself from it. It's the ultimate divide and rule, where you're dividing and ruling people down, not to this group against this group or this religion against this religion, but actually individual against the other individuals on the planet. Because that's what me, me, me does. I don't care how it affects you, affects you, affects you, me, me, me. So if you have a situation where you're only doing that, then obviously you're going to create a society based on me, 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 and a situation where what happens to other people doesn't matter. Now, you come across people who are in that me, me, me mode, and then they'll complain about austerity programs by governments, saying it's not fair on this person or that person. And we don't want a me, me, me society. We want a fair society. But when it comes to, here's the situation, how do I respond? The question is not how does the greater good benefit, but how does this affect me, me, me? And I would say this, I've said it before, what would change this world overnight and so dilute this process of perception manipulation that Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars details, is if we started saying, when a situation arose, not how does this affect me, what is the best thing to do for me in this situation, but to say, what is the fair and just thing to do for the greater good in the situation that I face. So with that attitude, you might say, well, I might not get what I want out of this situation, but if I did, it wouldn't be fair. So therefore, you do the fair thing rather than the me, me, me thing. Just think of that. If people started saying, what is the most just and fair thing to do in this situation? Suddenly, the world changes. Suddenly, people are caring for each other. Suddenly, they are doing what is right for the greater good rather than for themselves. And the manipulation of perception, the manipulation of the psyche that this document describes, one of its foundations is to get people to think only of self, because they know that that in so many ways is the ultimate in divide and rule. And so you get situations where people say that something must happen, and we must get behind something, or this must happen for the greater good. And then when something happens they don't like, they want to destroy something that was created for the greater good. And that's what I mean. And so you get so-called radical people who claim to be fighting the system, and they've been played like a violin by the system. And it's systematic, and they don't know they're doing it because the system has them. So you look at this, and you look at what this social engineering wants to create, which is a divided, at war with itself society, so the few can control the mass of the people. So one antidote to it is, don't always say what's right for me in a situation, but what's right for the greater good. The other thing is, never give up. Never give up standing up for what you believe in. Because what this is designed to do is to put so much pressure on those that do stand up and speak out against the system, and it's detailed a few things of what it says you do to them, that they give up and walk away. And in the 25 years I've been on this road, I've seen so many people come, and they were flavor of the month in the conspiracy arena for a while, and then they go, and what happened to them? Don't know. And then you come, and then they go, what happened to them? Don't know. And then they go, oh no, I can't be doing it anymore. It's too much hassle, mate. You know, I mean, people having a go at me. Oh, I can't be doing with it. And there's this thing they say, a puppy is for life, not just for Christmas. Well, if you want to head off what this and all these other things we talk about in the Dot Connecting show are dedicated to introducing, if you want to head off your children and grandchildren and people even alive today, most of them alive today, are going to face, then challenging it is not when it suits you. Challenging it is not for a year. It's for life. And no matter what they throw at you, you never give up, because that's what this is trying to get you into, a state of cracking up and walking away. Too much pressure. Oh, really? I feel for you. What about people who haven't got anything to eat in Africa and other parts of the world? Hey? What about kids being abused and having their lives destroyed by political paedophiles and all this other stuff that goes on? Yeah? What about all the people that are in desperate trouble now? Disabled people having their benefits taken away. And don't you tell me that standing up for what you believe in gives you more pressure than that. Let's never give up. Let's never walk away. Because what are we saying? Okay, I accept that this nightmare society is going to happen because I haven't got the backbone to stand up to it ongoing for as long as it takes, or what's happening to me is more important than that. And if we don't do that in enough numbers, this will reach its goal of a society that will have people nothing more than terminals on a computer system, being told what to think, being told what to do, and having no freedom whatsoever. You tell me the pressure's too great to stand up to that. And I tell you what, and I think I may have proved this over the years. No matter what's thrown at me for the rest of my life, however long it will be, I will never give up, ever, on challenging this and alerting people to it, no matter how me, and people without a backbone to keep going may try to undermine me. I ain't going anywhere.
Brilliant stuff, David. What a great way to end it. Thanks for that. Don't forget, you can catch David on the Richie Allen Show Monday to Friday doing a paper review with me. That's it for this edition of Dot Connecting with David Icke. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.